Hello, and welcome back to the Happy and Healthy in Midlife Summit for women who want to cruise through midlife, feeling stronger, more confident, and fulfilled. I'm your host, Sherry Jibb, and I am so excited to have Julia Seal joining us today. Julia Seal is the founder of Happiness Matters in Midlife, from puzzled to resilient, creative, and thriving, no matter what. Happiness Matters is all about putting our whole being happiness as the top priority in midlife, crafting what happiness means to us at the deepest level, coaching to move beyond our current struggles, and evolving ourselves towards a deep, soulful connection to our lives. I am fascinated with the ongoing pursuit of happiness and by the choices we make in our everyday lives that lead us away from our happiness. Examining these together brings you into direct conversation with your own happiness, where we reimagine your life and integrate long-lasting change so you can move forward into the next phase of your life in your own version of resilient, creative thriving. Julia has been coaching professional women since 2009 and is a professional certified coach accredited by the International Coach Federation. Her coaching draws on a multidisciplinary approach underpinned by integral relationship systems, leadership, and life coaching, as well as neuroscience and meditation. She is the creator of the Happiness Matters in Midlife podcast, an exploration of evolving our best life in midlife through work and relationships by coaching ourselves every day. Welcome, Julia. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank
Beautiful.
you for that. Sounds quite amazing when someone else reads it.
True, right? True. So tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from? And
yeah, so you probably hear that I have a slightly different accent. So I'm actually at the very southern tip of Africa. I live in Cape Town now, but actually I'm Zambian born and brought up right throughout Africa actually, and a bit of UK and European experience. So yes, I live down here in Cape Town where it's winter at the moment and pretty cold. I'm here with my husband and my stepson, 2 huge dogs. Yeah, I coach online, which is fabulous because then I get to speak to people all over the world, like you.
so true, right? It's just beautiful what you know the online world has brought us and the capabilities.
Yeah.
So tell us, Julia, what inspires you?
So what inspires me? It's such a fabulous question because I think what inspires me to do the work, but also what inspires me to be in the world, I think are almost two things that are different, but they also, luckily for me, feel the same things. So I think what I really love working with women who are passionate about life and passionate about, I call it contribution. So it's not like showing up as our best selves into the world and kind of just being our whole selves in the world and living into the best version of ourselves. So whenever I'm around women like that, or I'm coaching women like that, or my friends, it is for me the greatest inspiration. And I think it's also this possibility of if we're these women, then who follows behind us? You know, I mentor a group of about 25 young Namibian women, and it is just wonderful to be able to be a role model for them, or for them at least to see my journey, especially through midlife. They got to see me all the way through menopause and all of that. And then being able to talk about happiness to them when they're just beginning and starting out their lives, as opposed to when we're further down and we're feeling full of regret and worry and concern that we've come into the end of our lives. And it's this ability to just live into our passion, live into our best selves. That's inspiring.
Absolutely. Beautiful. So your topic today is whole being happiness in midlife. I love that word, whole being. I think that's so important. So how has the pursuit of happiness been useful and unhelpful to us by the time we get to midlife?
So That's a great question, because I think what happens to us when we start out in life, and let's be honest, we are wired to pursue happiness. Our brain is actually wired to pursue things that keep us safe and things that bring us comfort. So a lot of that is actually quite hedonistic, things like chocolate and sugar and those kind of things. So that is our brain's wiring. So we go out into the world and there's a whole multitude of things for us to choose. What are we going to do with our lives when we're young? All the way from very small up until, in our 20s, choosing careers. And we tend to not necessarily pursue what we want. And so we pursue what I like to sort of almost say what we think will make us happy. But it hasn't necessarily been a really carefully thought out, intentional, purposeful choice about what is happiness. So we then end up somewhere along the line of our lives like not feeling happy. And so what is happy? And then the minute you start asking that question, people really struggle with that, because, there's positive psychology and there's now, positive whitewashing. So now does it mean all that? So I love this concept of whole being happiness. And one of the nicest ways to describe it is, if you think of the sun, and the sun is an incredibly bright light. So if you think of the sun as happiness, but if you stare at the sun, you're actually going to hurt yourself. If you just pursue the sun, are you going in the right way? It's so bright, it's almost unobtainable. But the minute the sun breaks down through a prism or through a raindrop, it becomes a rainbow. And you've got all these different colors of the rainbow. Each of them are incredibly beautiful in themselves. And so you can look at whole being is made up like a rainbow of happiness. So, you've got emotional happiness. You've got happiness in your relationships. You've got happiness intellectually. And what does that mean? Or physical happiness and spiritual happiness. So all these different dimensions and the pathways that you move along in your life, creating, and that's what we're doing the whole way through our lives. We're building up little pictures of happiness that we think are going to lead to this big picture of whole being happiness. And very often when we get to midlife, which is this amazing opportunity, it's like a reset. It's almost like you and I we talked earlier about how menopause is the actual physical thing about menopause is it kind of stops us in our tracks. And that's the opportunity on the happiness journey. It's to really look at our lives and say, well, what have we done? And what kind of happiness have we crafted for ourselves at this point? And what is whole being? Are we living in a whole being happiness, which is, kind of deep contentment, a deep okayness with whatever's going on in life? I mean, I'm not happy. My mum is aging. She's 89. She's locked away in frail care. I'm not happy about that.
Yeah.
But I am content and deeply okay with that. And that is whole being happiness. It's much richer and more, embracing everything about who we are, and the grief and the empty nest syndromes. All of that is included in whole being happiness.
I love that. Yeah. I love that, because I think that's, we get into this, what is happiness? And in your concept of whole being happiness, just really, it's all about happiness.
And another nice way of looking at it, Sherry, is if you think of happiness as a jigsaw puzzle, I think that's a really fun way of looking at it. And the reason I kind of got to this thing about the jigsaw puzzle is during COVID and lockdown, everyone started doing puzzles again.
I did my first one during the lockdown.
When we were kids, But so what we've been doing pretty much up until we get to menopause and midlife is we've been creating a puzzle with a whole bunch of pieces that are not necessarily of our own choice, or we've taken this from the media and this from school and this from our parents and this from our culture, and we've been crafting this picture. And it might be beautifully formed in some places, the picture of I want a family with children and I think you have 8 grandchildren, right?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Number 9 on the way. Yeah.
Children. So that little picture of my puzzle looks divine and fabulous, but it doesn't look so good when it comes to my health, for example.
Yeah.
And so this puzzle doesn't really, it's a bit of a messy artwork when we get to midlife. And so the opportunity is to pull the puzzle to pieces, pull all the pieces together and have a look at them and just go, well, which ones do I want to keep? What is really contributing to my happiness? What is not? And then when you start putting it together, it's like being a master craftsman or craftswoman or an artist, because you're now looking at your life that you've lived so far and putting it back together and saying, well, I'm really proud of this. Because, oh my goodness, I can tell you most midlife women don't have a lot to say good about their lives.
Oh, wow. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, obviously, as a coach, I'm seeing people who are coming with issues, but boy, people are hard on themselves.
Yeah.
So part of that is just actually acknowledging and celebrating everything that we are and everything that we've done to date. And what do we want to take forward with that, into our lives, into the next phase with that? And then once we start putting that all back together, then we can see maybe there are some gaps.
Yeah, that we want to fill in. And I think that's so important, to take the time to celebrate. And women don't, a lot of women don't. Some do, but a lot of women get to a certain point. We get to a point and then it's like, okay, what's next? Where are we going next? And not being in that celebration. And that adds to happiness.
Yeah.
When you take that time to celebrate, really does.
Yeah, because it sort of locks in what we've been doing with our lives for the last 50 years. So just stop and look at what we've created so far. Because the interesting thing is, if you take that time to stop and have a look at it and maybe piece it together again, is there is an incredible sense of pride and accomplishment and almost gleeful happiness in a way, and an acceptance then of, this doesn't feel so good here. Like my relationship with my siblings isn't that great. But it's easier to look at.
Yeah.
Because that's what we want to do. That's the opportunity in midlife is that, to step into the things that we haven't always had the courage to step towards.
That is so true. Such a transformation, a transition happening in our lives at this time of our lives. And a lot of women looking at it and saying, okay, well, exactly as you said, right? Here's my jigsaw. Here's my puzzle. And what do I want it to look like now as I come into this last third, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. I think we've talked a bit about this. Well, we talked about whole being happiness, but how do we create whole being happiness?
So like I said, I think one of the most important things is that first step of just looking at everything that you currently have. How do you describe your life? How do you even see your life? How would you tell your life story to another person who was incredibly interested in your life?
That's a good little exercise.
Yeah. So, like someone that you've got the ear to talk to for like a good 3 hours. How would you narrate the story of your life? And are you happy with that way that you're viewing your life? Because often, we don't even listen to how we speak about ourselves or speak about our lives. We very often talk very negatively. I've been overweight my whole life and now it's just menopause and you've got midlife spread and it's just the end of that, Instead of seeing, well, you birthed 4 children and then you got sick and, all these incredible things. So it is taking that time to look at your life. And I love that experience, because that to me is the powerful foundation of happiness. Is everything that we've got to today. And then how do we create it? Well, there are, through scientific research into the field of positive psychology and into the field of happiness, there are pathways that help, that kind of exponentially add to happiness. So things like, do you have a contemplative practice? So meditation, as an example, doesn't have to be meditation, because whatever, spiritual background you come from, it's more, do you have time alone? Do you think about things? Do you kind of, I call it noodling. Do you like just noodle on your life for a while? So that's a pathway to happiness. Another wonderful pathway to happiness is purpose and living into a legacy. So a lot of the women I coach are professional women. And so when you get to sort of 55, you're thinking about retirement and what legacy do you want to leave behind you? Like I was saying, I mentor these young women in Namibia. That's part of the legacy that I feel I can share. It might be empty nest. So how do you want to change the way we relate to our adult children? So there could be a huge, huge impact on our happiness, is the state and quality of our relationships. And I think, come to midlife, we really are reassessing a lot. We might be reassessing our marriages, reassessing, our adult children. They won't get off the couch, post-COVID, we can't get them moving.
True story.
Or, our friendships have changed. And are they really, really, really enriching us and bringing us happiness? So assessing our relationships and the types of connections that we have. And then, of course, physical. We want to really look at ourselves physically, and how are we leading ourselves through menopause and after menopause. So not really just weight, but actually our own, how are we sleeping? How are we breathing? How are we moving our bodies? How much connection do we have with our bodies? That's a huge part of the happiness, is that level of relationship that we have with our bodies and the softening of that relationship. It's like you said earlier, we've been driving, it's like this thing and this thing and this thing. And now we get to the point of, now we need to really look at our bodies, look at our relationship to our bodies, and build happiness into them. So there are definite kind of proven pathways to exponentially improve happiness. But I can tell you, once women start puzzling their happiness, they know. We all know what we need to do.
Sometimes we just need to be nudged or pointed in the right direction, or look at it from a different perspective.
That perspective is good, because almost like that eagle eye perspective.
I love that. Yeah.
So beautiful. That brings that again, if looking back at the past, so you don't have regret for the past, comes with that high level perspective.
And that deep understanding.
Yeah.
And acceptance. So, well, it happened, and this is the way it was, but that's okay. It doesn't define me at this stage in my life.
And it's part, for example, I'm divorced from my first husband of, almost 20 years. And how can people say, how do you say that actually contributes to your happiness? Apart from the fact that it, kind of really profoundly changed me, because it was so painful, but it also made me look at happiness and say, well, what do I want next? And what is the learning from this, and what has it taught me, and what do I want next? If I am going to get remarried, what does that look like? I can regret that and say, boy, because it felt like 20 years was on a garbage heap after that. And yet now I can look at it and say, it was all part of it. It was one of the main things that got me sitting here in front of you, is.
Yeah, exactly. Those past life experiences. Yeah. For sure. For sure. What do you mean by evolve ourselves?
I love that question. It's now you think we're kind of like, we don't change, hey? Like, how much are we going to change in midlife? What really, Julia, are you smacking your stocks and evolving yourself? But this is the fascinating thing, is we are constantly changing, all right? We're not the same people that we were when we were 20.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, we get wiser, we hope, somewhat smarter, probably kinder and compassionate. Yeah. And so the opportunity around midlife for me is, because menopause shocks our system, we have to stop usually at some point. Some kind of burnout or something happens to us. And so then we're left looking at our lives saying, this is possibly not where I want to be. So what is next? Now, when you look at like that jigsaw puzzle of your life and there's gaps in the jigsaw puzzle, it's usually because there's some skill or capability that we have been missing our whole lives. And, you know, for a lot of women, if I can use overeating as an example, we've been comfort eating our whole lives because we haven't actually learned the skill of staying with our emotions, our difficult emotions. As soon as something is painful or uncomfortable, we swap and we take food. So the evolution is kind of staring at us right in the face when we look at the gaps in our lives and saying, well, this is where we journey to next. Because there's something here, that there is something there for us to learn. There's something for us to expand into and to grow into. Relationships is the best one. There's something there for us, you know. So that's why I call it evolution, because it's a curiosity and a massive expansion of our beings if we go to the places with courage that we've never wanted to go to before.
Yeah, absolutely. And absolutely. And feeling wise enough and trusting ourselves enough that courage, and we have the courage to take those steps.
Oh my goodness. And I can tell you that every midlife woman I have ever coached or met has that courage.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It's right there, you know. And what's exciting for me is when we walk towards the thing that is unpleasant, scary, dreaded sometimes, and the courage we get from looking at it in the face and unpacking what it is and why we've been avoiding it. Very often it dissolves. I mean, that's fascinating. So you've been like not wanting to look at this for 20 years and then it somehow dissolves or it shifts or it changes. But then what happens to us when we move beyond that? That's incredible. That's when I talk about, you know, like living into our best selves.
Absolutely.
Because then we become these, well, we are already incredible people, but we become unstoppable, actually. In whatever we want to become unstoppable in, whether it's our yoga practice or, you know, looking after grandbabies.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And I, you know, looking at something and saying, okay, I'm going to choose something different this time. You know, I looked at it this way for so many years, and now I'm going to choose to look at it a different way. And I, you know, as a coach, this is, you know, obviously part of what you do is presenting that different way of looking at something. And then through that, you know, choosing to look at something a bit differently brings that freedom and that courage to allow us to move forward and find that happiness somewhere where maybe we didn't have that in our lives. And
I think also, you know, a lot of it has got to do, like you say, with taking a different perspective. But I think what can also be really useful is we can actually work with our brains. You know, I talk a lot about brain management, for example, like as a kind of catch-all phrase. Because if we actually understand the structure of our brains, we can work with our brains. We can get to understand our wiring, how our brains are wired, and then work with it. So that's part of, that's what would happen in coaching, is how are you working with the way your brain is structured? So it's chasing its hedonistic happiness down here. But what do we actually want to do when we're looking at being brave and stepping into courage? What does that mean when we're working with our brains? And how are we using our bodies as another brain to guide us as well? So it is definitely another perspective, but there's all these other aspects of working, with our beings at every level, that whole being, really.
I'm going to ask you to expand just a little bit on that body as a brain. I've not heard it referred to like that, and there's a lot wrapped up in there, and so I'm going to ask you to expand a little bit about that.
So I'm having some fun with it on the podcast at the moment. So yeah. So there's two lovely ways of looking at it, all right, is that, our actual body, and, we are physically structured. We have, brain cells in our stomach. So we have physical structures, and our body is constantly feeding our brain information, huge amounts of information every single second. So there's knowledge in our bodies that we, especially in the West, we kind of cut off here,
Absolutely.
very cognitive. And so we're only really registering if I'm hot or cold or sick, and not really thinking about anything else. So it's quite a journey to feel into your body. And, you will know this from your own work. And I'm a yoga practitioner myself. And so it's like waking up that connection to our bodies, really feeling into it. But then this is the thing, because body is brain, so it will give us this wisdom. And that's a lot of what's been spoken about in the media, right? As you must listen to your body, it's got all this wisdom. But you also have to remember that our body is wired for survival. It's wired to pursue comfort, and it's wired to pursue safety from danger. So it can sometimes also trip us up.
Good to know.
Just the same way that our own brain can trip us up. Because if I'm saying we need to be courageous to walk into a situation and evolve ourselves, every pore in our bodies might be saying, don't do that.
Yeah.
So how do you learn? How do you learn to differentiate what that is? And building that relationship with your body, so that, if you trigger an almost trauma response sometimes, by saying, let's say I'm going to go and sort out my relationship with my sister, and it triggers a trauma response. It's how do you connect your body enough to settle it, to say, I'm fine, we're fine, and we're going to do this, and we're going to move beyond this. And so that's the thing, is A is the connection to our body, and then B is like learning to trust and learning to work with it.
Fabulous. Fabulous. Thank you so much for expanding on that. That is just great information. So as we're wrapping up today, if you were to leave our listeners with one inspired action step that they could do today, what would that be?
Look at your life as a huge, exciting accomplishment. And pat yourself on the back for it.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful and so true. I love that. I love that. I know you have a free gift for us today. Unstick your happiness in midlife, post-pandemic. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So what I thought I would do for everyone who's watching is to just open up an hour coaching session with me.
Wow.
Yeah. So I've opened up my calendar for 3 weeks to run through the summit. And
Nice.
the idea is to get on a call with me, and we will look at what is really like the one thing that's in your way right now. Like, if you're feeling, especially post-pandemic, I've got, you know, we've kind of moved a little bit beyond this debilitating anxiety that we were all feeling this time last year. But now, you know, as a woman going back to work and you're leading a team, now you've got the mental health issues around your team, or you know, you don't want to go into work, or you've kind of still got your kids at home. So because it's only an hour, right? It's not a coaching program, but I will help you look at what's going on right now so that you can move forward, and we'll work out some first steps. So that's kind of what it is. So give you some momentum really in your life.
That is beautiful. What a beautiful free gift. Wow. I'm sure lots of women are going to take advantage of that one.
Yeah,
That is,
Talk to you in Cape Town.
that I mean, and you know, what a small world it is now, right? You know, that's just so beautiful. And I truly believe now that for women in midlife, there's more resources out there for them. And the coming together of women like you, sharing stories, your skill set, you know, tips and really shattering myths about midlife. You know,
Well, I
women
mean,
can now, yeah, they can now
think about
participate.
what our mothers had. Our mothers had none of this.
Yeah,
Who did that? Who did
that's
they
right.
talk to? Maybe they talked to their mothers, or they read a women's magazine, and that's all they had.
Yeah, so true. So true. And now it's a whole different experience for women, and we can be empowered. We can have the knowledge, you know, we can navigate our midlife and really make those changes that make us happy, and seek out professionals now that aren't, you know, always in the town we live in. Now we have that whole, the world is open to us to seek out professionals to help us navigate midlife, which I think is just wow. Wow.
It is a wow.
Julia, I want to thank you so much for joining me. I know that you and I could chat forever, but I want to thank you so much, and for sharing your time with us today, and just awesome stuff. Awesome. Great. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for joining us for just another great interview here in the Happy and Healthy in Midlife Summit. And please join us again for some more interviews. And again, thank you so much.